It is September 2nd at 4 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute yourself, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you're leaving the meeting so that we can track a quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by the way of roll call, not using audio. Done by roll call using audio, not via the chat function. So, Michael Edmonds.
Present.
Olga Flores. Is Olga here? Sharia Jimenez.
Present.
I'm here. Liz Wilshin.
Here.
I believe Jay Young is absent today.
I am here.
And Mindy Burns.
Jim, I'm
oh,
here.
Jay, you're here.
Yeah.
Ah, there you are. Okay, I have my notes that you're going to be absent. And Mindy Bernstein.
Present.
Hey, Mindy. And our exit, Lori Mazurbo.
Present.
Hey, Lori. Okay, and our ex officio members, Maggie Amato Tejas.
Present.
Wendy Asher.
Present.
Marianne Bierling.
Present.
Hi, Marianne. Mark Clark. Is Mark here? Vicky Casino.
Present.
Marcos Ismail.
Present.
Betty Villegas. Okay, Corin Manning.
Present.
And Liz Morales.
I am here.
Okay, so we have quorum. First thing we're going to do is review and adopt the meeting minutes from the August 5th meeting. Those minutes were published on our website. Does anyone have changes to the meeting minutes? Okay, hearing no changes without a, oh, is there a comment here? Oh, Mark Clark just joined. All right, without objection, I'd like to, I guess the meeting minutes are approved, unless anybody has a change.
No.
Okay. Call the audience, agenda item number 3. This is a time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting laws, Commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public must be considered as an agenda item for future meetings. So is there anyone who would like to, anyone from the public who would like to speak? Okay, well, we'll move on. We're going to slamming right through these today. Move on to agenda item number 4.
Jim, as a point of
Yep.
order, I emailed you about this, but I don't know if you got a chance to read my email. I'd like for us to kind of have more consistency with the call to the audience. We've had 2 members of the public ask for 2 different things, and every single time someone has requested a different call to the audience time in our agenda, we have accommodated like individual members of the public, and we are supposed to accommodate the community. We're all about equitability. And while I do appreciate the one member of the public who said that they would like to give input in order for us to implement what they're requesting, I did bring up a really good point, which is that we don't have a email inbox for them to submit any input they might have on our agenda items, that sort of thing. And I think that that's really necessary for us to consider what they might be saying ahead of time and not bring up what's said and call to the audience as a point of order and in violation of Robert's Rules of Order. Also, I think that in order for us to be equitable, we should be doing call to the audience at the end so that we have opportunity for the most people who may be getting out of work, that sort of thing, to participate. So that's it.
Jim?
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, just in regards to the email, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but I was under the impression we have an email address up on our webpage, and I think it might be something as simple as clerk@tucsonaz.gov. Is that correct? For public input?
The clerk's office does have, on the clerk webpage, there is an email address. And then on the Housing and Community Development Commission website, there is a place where people can put in their email for updates. And then at the bottom is a HCD email address that people could write to, and it would get to me eventually, that I would pass on to you all. We can look into getting a commission email account that would just remove one layer of, it might get to me a day or 2 earlier. So that's something, if you all were interested in, we could do.
I'm fine. I think that's a good idea. If we can do a commission email for people that want to have a written comment. I personally speaking, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other in terms of if the public portion is at the beginning meeting or the after the meeting. I missed the meeting where the person asked to move it to the end, so I didn't really understand their concerns with having it in the beginning. I know that the reason that it was asked to move it to the front is if somebody wants to comment on something that we're going to vote on, they can do it before the vote takes place, as opposed to after, when it may not matter. So I guess we'll just spend a couple minutes on this. Does anybody else have an opinion one way or the other on having the public comment section at the beginning or the end? Mindy?
In my experience in being in committees, that the call to the audience traditionally was at the end of the meeting. I am not attached having it in the beginning where people can comment on a topic that will be voted on. So just putting it out that I have no attachment about before or after, but I agree with Liz. We need to address the 2 people, each requesting the opposite of one wanted the before, one wanted the after. We need to make a decision.
I mean, that'd be another option, is we could do both. I mean, we haven't had a ton of people asking to speak, so it's probably not going to be a huge time commitment. Mike?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about doing both. Having experienced it at the beginning as well as at the end, I prefer it at the beginning because it gets the comments out the way so we can get to the business that was planned. Having it at the end, to me, could, I'm not saying it has been, but could lead to a little bit of clumsiness as we're stacking information onto a potential audience who now they, you know, they were set up to comment on something from a past meeting, but now they heard something in the current meeting, and you know that just adds a little extra time. So I strongly feel my strong feelings are for the beginning of the meeting. Although, you know, maybe at the beginning and at the end. I hadn't thought about that, Jim.
Well, Liz, how do you feel about that? What if we have two agenda items, one at the beginning, one at the end? We've only had, I think.
I've noticed that we run out of time. So I think we should just choose one as my suggestion. I mean, we barely have time for one person to give input with the way that we manage our meeting. So I think that making a decision one way or the other would be the best time management and respect for every commission member. And I think an email address is, you know, a good solution for people to want to give input ahead of time as well. I do think at the end is what, you know, working people requested, and we're trying to be equitable and create workforce housing, create housing to accommodate people who don't have high incomes. So.
All right, Lori.
I was just going to say that I think at the beginning is actually more respectful of folks' time, because we have gone over numerous times, and I wouldn't want it to seem like we aren't giving the attention the public should have. People have dropped off towards the end, and I think if somebody takes the time to come to our meeting, they should be given our full attention, which I think they're going to get at the beginning much more than at the end.
Hi, this is Wendy. I think it's better that the public be able to participate at the beginning of the meeting. That way they don't have to sit through an entire meeting, and they know when they will be speaking. And I think on a case-by-case basis, if somebody indicates that they can't possibly do that because of their work schedule, then we can make an exception.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think if you're okay, Liz, let's keep it the way it is moving forward. And if somebody requests to speak at the end, I agree with that. We can make an exception for them. Okay. So agenda item number 4, subcommittee updates. First, the housing segregation. And I apologize, I don't have the chairs on the tip of my fingers.
That's me, Jim. I don't have any updates.
Okay.
I was on vacation last time and have not done anything up to this point, but we'll get on that for next meeting.
Okay. Permanent supportive housing.
Jim, I can speak to that. Unfortunately, I was also out for a week to Alaska, and I can always share with people another time. That was a knowledge exchange with housing authorities who do Indian Native American housing. But so what we ended up doing is scheduling it for the 9th. And so that is on the calendar.
Okay. So you've got your first meeting coming up on the 9th?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And affordable housing. Shay?
Yeah, sorry, I've been slammed as well, but I sent out the coordinating email, I think yesterday. So we're just trying to settle on a time and date, and then from there we can kind of hammer through the rest of our logistics. And then sorry, yeah, that's it. That's the status. Sorry.
Shay, how many people outside of the commission are on that committee?
Quite a few. I think we have about, oh, let me look at the list. Hold on.
I think there's 5 or 6 individuals outside of the commission who are part of that subcommittee.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, so the only reason I bring that up for Jay and Liz is if there are other individuals who you think would, you know, kind of bring a different perspective and would like to be involved, feel free to include them. as part of your subcommittee. It's not limited to the members of the commission. Anne?
Thanks, Jim. Just a couple logistical things. Jay, Shay, I can work with you. We do have to, once you set your meeting time and day, we do have to post the agenda, given has to follow open meeting rule. So don't hesitate to reach out. I can help you with those things. And we'll have, for each of your subcommittees, we'll have a staff member there to help you out.
Mindy?
Thank you. I was wondering how do I find out when the other subcommittees are meeting? I'm curious to sit in on all of them if I can, beside myself, my subcommittee, so I can learn and get a broader picture, not to be intrusive though.
So, two things on that. We can post, so the clerk's office will have them posted as part of open meeting. We'll post all the agendas that we get on the commission website as well. And then people can sit in as long as there's not more than 5 members of a commission on that subcommittee or at that subcommittee meeting. So the only time, Mindy, that would be a problem, if a lot of people show up, just make sure there's not more than 5 for open meeting rules.
Okay.
I don't see that being a problem.
Okay. Any other comments about subcommittees?
Will they be listed on the website?
Yes, I believe they will.
Yeah, we'll get them posted both on the Housing and Community Development website, and they'll also be posted on the clerk's website.
Okay.
One thing I probably should have brought up during roll call is we did lose a commission member. Monica Lane has resigned, so we now have 2 openings as part of the commission, the youth member and then her former position. The letter to mayor and council has gone, I believe it's gone out. If it's not gone out, it's imminent. And part of that letter, we are requesting that they help fill those vacant positions. So if any of you know somebody who you think would be a good fit, please encourage them to reach out to City Council and request to be added to the commission.
And one thing Liz is in process of filling the youth seat, and I'll say I don't want to put her on the spot, but we do have somebody who may be interested sitting in today, observing the meeting. So we're excited to try to get that moving.
Great. Okay. Without objection, then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Phoenix Housing Plan. We have the privilege of having Cherie Boucher, I hope that's how you pronounce her name, who is currently with ADOH and was formerly with the City of Phoenix. So Cherie, welcome, and I am going to hand you the baton.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for the opportunity to meet with you today. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I was just going to run through just the history of the Housing Phoenix Plan, how it came about, the research that went and the findings and some of the housing initiatives. So it's a lot of information, and I'm definitely open at any point. If you want to stop me and dive into any of the details, let me know. But I'm here as a resource. So as was mentioned, I was the affordable housing advocate with the City of Phoenix. And then recently, about a month ago, stepped into this new role at the Arizona Department of Housing, which I'm really excited to work on statewide initiatives. And I'll be definitely partnering with Tucson and Pima County moving forward a lot more than I was in my prior role. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. So thank you so much. I did send out a PDF version of my PowerPoint, but it was really it was today. So I'm sure we'll be rolling out a copy to you all so you have it for yourselves as well, probably later on, but that will be available. I gave that to Anne today, so it wasn't probably enough time to get it all to you today.
It's on the website.
Oh, woo, wow, that was quick. Y'all work fast. Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. Zoom screen share. Okay, I'm gonna do in presentation mode. I hope it doesn't swap my screen, but it did. All right, I'm gonna have to do a new share here. Sorry about that, guys. Here we go. Okay, better? No?
Perfect.
Oh,
Oh, wait, now it just went away.
I closed it too soon. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. Better. Here we go. Okay, thank you all for having me here. So the first thing I wanted to go over is really what our goals. So what happened was Mayor Gallego reached out to the housing department and said, I want you all to undergo the Affordable Housing Initiative, which morphed into the Housing Phoenix Plan. But the goals of the Affordable Housing Initiative were first to identify the housing need in our community or in the city of Phoenix's community and figure out what the true gap was between the number of housing units we had and how many were needed for the different groups of people in our community. And then we also wanted to take a look at the city of Phoenix's development sites because the city of Phoenix is one of the major landowners in that jurisdiction, and wanted to identify which sites could be utilized for redevelopment of mixed income and affordable housing. And then from there, we really wanted to research policy recommendations, taking a look at best practices throughout the United States of different affordable housing initiatives, and also looking at our internal stakeholders and gathering a lot of information from them about what the barriers were and what some potential solutions were to overcome those barriers. So during our initial phase, we did extensive research and outreach. We had over 50 different meetings with community members, stakeholders, groups of different stakeholders, really to get feedback from them and figure out what were the barriers to affordable housing and how can we overcome the barriers. So I always like to say that that was, I think, the most successful part of our plan was that we engaged the community a lot. We did 2 huge feedback initiatives. So the first was in the beginning, and then after we had the data and some potential policy solutions, we then went back to the community to make sure that those policy solutions worked for them and they didn't have any concerns or wanted to tweak anything. So I think the outreach really helped get the success out there and also tell the story about the need in our community. So kind of starting from there, I always like to show why there is such a need for housing and why there's such a need for affordable housing on so many levels is because what we've seen in Phoenix is that the housing production hasn't kept pace with the population growth. So we continue to be one of the city of Phoenix continues to be the fastest growing and 5th largest city in the nation. So you can see the population growth is completely outpacing the housing production, which is a huge problem. Another item is, and this is true everywhere, the cost of housing is outpacing the income increases from year to year. So what we found in City of Phoenix was that 10% of income increases had occurred. The rent had increased 28% and home prices 57%. And keep in mind, all this data was from 2020. So we have seen home prices and rent prices skyrocket since then. So I'm sure these percentages have only increased since that time. And one thing I loved to show people is that the perception of affordable housing and who needs affordable housing was completely skewed because almost 50% of the Phoenix population was extremely low to low income, which means that they would need some form of subsidy to be able to afford housing in our market. And they would be eligible for a lot of our federal programs that are serving folks that can't afford housing at the market rate. And that is completely shocking. And when you take into the low to moderate calculation, which is up to 80% of the area median income, which is kind of the cutoff for a lot of our HUD and federally funded programs, that means 65% of the Phoenix population was in that bracket that needs a subsidy to be able to afford housing. It's shocking, right? Because a lot of times there's that story around affordable housing that it's not an us problem, it's a them problem. But really, this is a large majority of our population that needs affordable housing, that needs help, that are working hard in our community and can't afford to live here. And then the remaining 35% of the population are in that moderate to high. So that's just kind of a breakdown that I like to show the percentage, because it was really shocking to see that number on the screen. And then we also did a cost burden analysis, which was really fun to see, because I love data. So I always get into the geeky side of the data numbers to see. We have from the household size, and this is all based on census data, like 555,000 households in the city of Phoenix. And 199,000 of those are cost burden, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. And when we broke that down into the different pools, that's 36% of our population that's cost burdened by housing, maybe one paycheck away from being homeless or experiencing homelessness because of that cost burden on their housing. And then 25% of our owner-occupied households are experiencing cost burden situations, and 50% of the renters. So that's a pretty significant number of households that are, living paycheck to paycheck and barely able to afford the housing that they have. This I thought was really interesting too, is that our income ranges versus the percent of cost burden. I mean, obviously it kind of is a no-brainer that our high income and moderate income households are not going to be as cost burdened, because the market rate is going to be more aligned with their ability to pay. But something that is really, really shocking is 94% of our extremely low households are living in a situation where they're extremely cost burdened by their homes. And then 81% of our very low, and our low are around 46%. But something that was interesting was that we saw that some of our low and moderate and high income households are almost cannibalizing our resources that are available, that are affordable to very low and low income households, which even creates more of a gap for those folks that are looking for that housing.
Hey, Cherie.
Yes.
A quick question on that last slide is cost burdened mean that they pay more than 35% of their monthly income in rent and utilities? Is that how you define cost burden?
More than 30% of their household income towards rent and utilities. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Mm-hmm. This is a little graphic that we made that really we wanted to break down what it is to be different types of households in our community, because a lot of times, because I come from the housing background, so a lot of times our housing people, we talk about 30% AMI and 50% AMI. And to the normal person, this means nothing, right? It's like, what is this AMI? Who cares? So I really wanted to break it down to a message that could take home to the community, that they would understand what these AMIs mean, because they relate to a lot of our federal funds. So for example, somebody who's retired and on a fixed income, Social Security, maybe earning around $15,000 a year, would be in that 30% AMI category. And what they can afford for rent is around $375. So you all know, like, you're looking at the number, there's no way you're going to find a rental house for that amount. And if they were to try to find a mortgage or purchase a home, they could probably mortgage around $49,000. And that's also not achievable in our market either. So you can see this is just a really far stretch for this household. Then we have maybe a service industry worker, a household of one that's earning around 26,000. They would be considered 50% of the area median income. And on that budget could probably afford around $650 in rent per month. And again, that in our market, in the city of Phoenix market, that's not achievable. So what we have found, and again, this data is from 2020, so things have only increased from here. The data that showed one bedroom rental apartment average of 1,100 in Phoenix, and that's on the low end now. I think it's even higher. So you can see a one-person household cannot afford, it's almost double what they can afford to be able to rent in Phoenix. And if they wanted to purchase a home, they could probably mortgage about 65,000. So that would be really hard to come by as well. On the home ownership market, what we found is the median home price, and again, this has only increased significantly since that time, is 248. So that's only achievable really for a household that is around 100% of the AMI, but I think it's more leaning towards 120% now with the home price increase. We have for an 80% AMI household, a 3-person household, maybe one parent with 2 children that's earning around 53,000. This is a great job, right? This is a great professional level job maybe that they're working, and still they would have difficulty purchasing a home in our community. And even if they're looking for a 2 or 3 bedroom rental home, they might have difficulty finding something that's affordable for them. So I like this because it kind of shows a depiction with real life examples of who's struggling to afford housing in our community today. And this is the results of our gap analysis. So, oops, I went too fast. So when we did our gap analysis, what we found was there was a gap of 163,000 housing units that were needed just in the city of Phoenix alone. And this included not only affordable housing, which we knew we needed a lot of affordable housing. We had over 99,000 units that were needed there, but also market rate. So that was a little bit shocking that we needed 63,000 market rate units to meet the demand. And that's probably why a lot of the folks within that income category are absorbing some of our workforce housing that we need for the lower income, but the higher income folks are cannibalizing that. So there's a need in our market and the city of Phoenix market for both market rate and affordable subsidized housing. Within that, we need 9,000 housing units for seniors, 5,000 housing units for veterans, 9,000 housing units for persons with disabilities, and persons experiencing homelessness, over 1,000 units. One thing that I think really helped kind of hit home with some of the direction of the policy was we wanted to take a look at, within the city of Phoenix, there is this concept of single family housing as the method of development, and anytime too much dense fashion development or even duplexes or triplexes kind of rocks the boat, and everybody wants to stay to the standard of single family housing. But what we found is our current vacant land was around 24,000 acres. And that's taking into account all the different land use types, assuming we can build housing, which we all know we can't build on all land use types. You're not going to want to build in industrial areas and areas where there's not it's not environmentally stable for housing to be there. So it's probably even less than that. So this is a generous assumption. Even so, if we were to develop in the single family fashion and needed to develop the 163,000 units that were needed, we would need 31,000 acres. So you can see there's not enough available land to build out in the single family fashion, which means that we needed to take a look at innovative and aggressive ways to implement changes and increase housing in new ways. So really kind of thinking outside the box and having a conversation about density and how density would help us achieve that goal. And it's a more sustainable way to build in general because you're using less resources for the land available. So finally, we created the Housing Phoenix Plan, which was an overview of all of the findings that we just kind of went through, and it created a goal of preserving and creating 50,000 homes by 2030 through 9 different policy initiatives. So I have all the policy initiatives here, and I was going to roll through them all one by one in the future slides, but do you want me to break real quick to see if there's any questions about the needs data? Because I know that was a lot of data all at once. Do you all have any questions before I move on to the policy initiatives?
I have a question about the data. Regarding the 94% of people living extremely low income who are cost burdened, does that mean that 6% of people have received vouchers or subsidized housing who are extremely or very low income in Phoenix?
Yes, that's a great question. And I've never had anyone put that connection together, but that's a wonderful question. And it also is 100% true. And it totally demonstrates that we are completely under subsidized on a federal level for the amount of vouchers that we need to serve that AMI bracket, because that's the primary way that we can really create affordable housing is through our housing choice voucher program, our Section 8 program, and our public housing. And both of those resources are completely under subsidized from a federal level to address the people in our community that need it, that are in that AMI bracket. So great question. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question about that, which is if people were to receive those vouchers, are there enough units for them to fulfill them?
Yes, I love that question because it leads into one of our policy initiatives. That was one of the barriers that we found a lot when we went out into the community, because we didn't have enough landlords that wanted to participate. So we developed a landlord incentive program, which we'll talk a little bit about. That's been very successful so far. And it was pretty easy to initiate and utilize the existing resources we had. But that one of the few of the things that we found with landlords not wanting to participate is that our processes took a long time and they were cumbersome to get paid. So we worked to streamline and make everything electronic. Payments were electronic, submissions of documents were electronic. And COVID helped with all that. It pushed kind of people to move to the electronic side. So that was really helpful. But we also created a landlord incentive program that helps increase participation in an extreme way. So those are all things great question. Yes. Anything else? Sorry, you can tell I get excited and enthusiastic about this. So
Yeah, I have a quick question. I was wondering what the status of applications for the Phoenix Section 8 program is, because I know here in Tucson, we've been closed to new applications for quite a period of time. And Liz can certainly speak to that as well, the other Liz. But I just wondered if that's an issue that happens in Phoenix as well.
yeah, so one of the things we looked at is what is our total wait list, because our application, or the City of Phoenix application for the Section 8 program is closed as well. And they don't plan to open it for the next 3 years because they have such a long wait list. But in combining our public housing and our HCV program, there's over 20,000 people that are on that wait list, which even further demonstrates how much need we have for those limited resources. That's a great question. Yeah.
Sherry, one question I have, and if it's we can talk about it later if it's too much in terms of getting into the weeds, but the estimate on the number of affordable units and market rate units, if it's possible to succinctly talk about that methodology that you use to estimate that.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. But I used quite a few resources. I used some census data, but we also had access to Apartment Insights, which I love that data set because it provides not only information for apartment units, but it also tells you which are subsidized generally through the low-income housing tax credit program and what their rental amounts are. So what I was able to do is take a look at what their going rate is for their rent and what income category that would be affordable to. So I was able to break it down even further to see this apartment unit is subsidized, but it's affordable to 30% AMI. This apartment unit is subsidized, but it's only affordable to 50% AMI. So then I was able to really siphon down the gaps for the different AMI ranges. And it was a wonderful data set. We also took a look internally at the City of Phoenix, we are supporting a lot of our own internal affordable housing. We have our different HCV program, our Section 8 program, and then we also have our gap financing program that has affordability restrictions that we pulled all of that internal data as well. And we took a look not only to that, but at the Arizona Department of Housing resources for the number of affordable units that they have on the market. They release this list every year of the projects that are funded through 9% and 4%. And that was another great resource because it kind of fills in the gap as well for where Apartment Insights doesn't show. So the combination of all those three resources, we were able to come up with a gap for what the needs were in our community and what we currently had. So it was a great undertaking. I had fun with it. I know other communities, the city of Tempe hired a consultant, and they literally went out and did an assessment and counted the houses and went into the weeds that way. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. I know the Morrison Institute is taking a look at ways that there can be like a consolidated way for different jurisdictions to look at their gap and find their gap. There's the gap analysis that is released every year through the National Low Income Housing Coalition, I think it is. But that is a really great tool. It's wonderful because they will give you your per unit gap for your community. But what I found limiting on the Phoenix side was that it was the Phoenix metro area, so it included the other jurisdictions. So that was a little bit limiting, but at least paints a little bit of a picture if you are okay with the metro area. And it gives you a picture of those that are extremely low and I think low, but it doesn't go into the market side. So those are a few different resources that you can kind of tap into.
I have a question as well. Kind of going off of that, obviously Phoenix, the city of Phoenix is part of a much larger metro area that, housing doesn't stop at the border of one. And, so how much does that go into how the city of Phoenix thinks about its affordable housing issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. We got that question a little bit when we were doing our outreach, that this is a regional issue. It's not a one single city issue. So that's a really good point, because a lot of times what happens, and I'm sure this happens all throughout the state, people will drive to qualify. So they'll just buy a house further out of town so that it's cheaper and that they can afford it. But then their transportation costs increase, and it still creates a situation that's hard. So the perspective of the city of Phoenix is they were really focused on within their city identifying the need, and within their city what they could do as a policy initiative. But I do think that there is definitely, especially with the new director at the Arizona Department of Housing, I think there is some direction to really look at these initiatives as a statewide option and look at how we can come together with all the municipalities and come up with regional solutions. So I think that is definitely necessary, not only for cities to look at solutions, but also to come together regionally and work together. Because especially right now, we're getting more funding than ever before for housing, and it's exciting. But I think coming together regionally and coming up with solutions is going to be key to the success of those funding sources. I hope that answers your question, but you can ask me more if that didn't get to the heart of the question.
No, yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you.
Okay. If there's anything else, y'all can interrupt me. I don't mind. But I'll go into the policy initiatives. There's a lot there, but we will kind of go through them. So the first policy initiative is to prioritize new housing in areas of opportunity. One of the main barriers that we heard from a lot of the different stakeholders was that a not in my backyard or NIMBYism sentiment was a huge barrier. People didn't want affordable housing or what they deemed to be affordable housing or even workforce housing in their neighborhoods or near their neighborhoods. So something that we cooked up was this concept of creating a scoring criteria, because what happens in the city of Phoenix, and I'm not sure if this is true everywhere, but a lot of the NIMBY sentiment comes into the process and blocks the affordable housing from happening when it's going through the rezoning process. So we wanted to create a tool for projects that were going through the rezoning process to have a scoring criteria so that they could communicate the benefit of that project to the decision makers. So you can really look at a more objective approach to the benefits of the project, who it's serving, how it's serving them, why it's a great location, if it's near transit, if it's near parks, if it's near employment services, and you know, all the great things, and developing a scoring criteria related to the project location. So it's a really cool concept, and the planning department is in the process of, they've developed the scoring criteria, but right now they're mapping it using GIS so that once we have a project location, it will automatically populate a score for that project. So it's a really neat way to kind of dig into the data and have an objective way to communicate the benefit, because a lot of times the feelings that are coming up through NIMBYism are subjective. They aren't really based on objective facts. So it's a great way to kind of communicate that in a different way and hopefully overcome some of those NIMBY arguments. This is one of the heavy hitters, and I know Tucson is doing some great work around here already, and I think you're beating Phoenix to the punch because they are taking a while on their research side. So we wanted to take a look at on our zoning text amendments, what could be done to change those zoning ordinances to facilitate more housing options. One, of course, is accessory dwelling units. This is a policy that a lot of different communities that have housing shortages have enacted to really help create infill opportunities for more housing units. So there's a lot of opportunities there with that accessory dwelling unit policy. One thing that the city of Phoenix wanted to do is look at affordable housing incentives. So this was something in exchange for the reduction of setbacks or increase in density. That would happen if you were able to provide affordable housing at your site or to pay into an affordable housing fund. So looking at ways that there can be some incentives for affordable housing. And then finally, the city of Phoenix is looking at a form-based code, which is a different type of zoning ordinance that allows for a lot more flexibility in the types of housing you can develop, where the old structure of zoning ordinances, you would have single family and then you would have multifamily, and the two shall never meet. But a form-based code really allows for a lot more flexibility and not really honing in on the specifics of what can happen there, but allowing it to look at the neighborhood characteristics and how those can kind of fit into the development of the property rather than just limiting it. And this allows for more flexibility of that missing middle that a lot of people talk about, where we don't see duplexes, triplexes, and some of those smaller multifamily development projects that really can increase what they call gentle density into the mix, so that we're still seeing getting the most bang for our buck when we're building on properties. So they call that the walkable urban code in the city of Phoenix. Previously, it was allowable. Folks could rezone to the walkable urban code if it was within the transit corridor, but they're hoping to expand it throughout the city so folks could rezone to the walkable urban code regardless of where they're at. So hoping that will create a little bit more flexibility and opportunities for the types of development that we see in Phoenix. I also wanted to highlight, you'll see pictures of housing in the background, and all of these pictures are subsidized housing projects that either were completed by the city of Phoenix in partnership with different developers or through nonprofit or for-profit developers that are working in the affordable housing arena. So we did, when we took these projects out and we took this presentation out to the community, we wanted to highlight that this is an affordable housing project. This is a beautiful project. You know, it doesn't have to correlate with the negative perceptions people often have related to subsidized housing. And then redevelop city-owned land initiative. So as I mentioned, the city of Phoenix is one of the major landowners. So we were looking to set aside some of our city-owned parcels for the redevelopment of affordable and mixed income housing, and also taking a look at the co-location of uses. Some other cities, what they have done is if they have an existing senior center, maybe have senior housing next to it, or if they have a park that has an underutilized parking lot, how can you redevelop that into housing so that the amenities not only are being utilized, but also you're taking a look at how to use the underused resources in a better fashion. So that's an exciting initiative that's moving forward, and they should be releasing RFPs in the next 5 years for all those city-owned parcels to partner with outside developers to redevelop those lands. Enhancing public-private partnerships through increased funding. So oftentimes, and everyone knows this, when you're talking about affordable housing, there's always that gap. There's always a gap in resources. We are in an exciting time where we're seeing a lot more resources funneled down through the federal government, through the home art funds, and through some of the relief that we've seen. But again, it's a very costly venture to create affordable housing. So what we wanted to do here is to kind of create a task force and really identify ways that that lenders and different community stakeholders could come together and develop other gap financing resources. And as we were rolling this out, the great thing happened with the Home Matters housing gap financing resource, and it really blew up. So it was kind of nice to see some organic happenings around a new types of private financing happening. So that was really helpful. And then the city of Phoenix is also taking a look at developing its own housing trust fund. So within that housing trust fund, we'll have some opportunities for folks to either voluntarily donate to that housing trust fund for affordable housing. We'll have options within that zoning criteria for folks to pay into the housing trust fund if they want to exchange for additional setbacks or reduction of setbacks, increase in height, reduction of parking. And then also taking a look at potentially through our GIPLET process for our that we have in our downtown corridor, that maybe in exchange for a GIPLET paying into an affordable housing fund, we received our first payment that way. So that's that excise tax that we have, a program that we have through our Community and Economic Development Department, where folks can enter into an agreement with the city of Phoenix and receive a reduction in taxes for proof that they're bettering the community through a lot of different perspectives, but one can be affordable housing. So if they decide they want to pay into an affordable housing funds, that could be another exciting way to gain traction there. Building innovations and cost saving practices. One of the things we found when we heard a lot of the feedback was that the whole process of affordable housing is cumbersome, and having some advocates to help push the projects along from the city side, having some help with the development team on the planning and development side would help push the projects through. Reduction in fees for permitting and all of the fees associated with planning and permitting would help the project. And one thing that came into play, especially for low-income housing tax credit projects, is that when you're going in for those tax credits, you're not able to source the offsite infrastructure requirements. So with the city of Phoenix, they were seeing a lot of impact for those offsite infrastructure, like improving the streets, putting in a new traffic light, or improving a sidewalk beyond their project. So some of our kind of street requirements were really pushing into the affordability of an affordable housing project. So one thing that I think is really neat is they're taking a look at their CDBG program, and other communities do this where they use their CDBG program to pay for offsite infrastructure improvements for affordable housing, and then the home funds can pay for gap within the hard construction costs. So it's kind of a cool combination and way to use those two resources together in a very cohesive way to help pay for affordable housing that is dealing with offsite infrastructure improvements that are well beyond what is anticipated. So that's kind of how they're designing the program. There's, everyone can anticipate a certain amount of offsite infrastructure costs, but we were looking at situations where it's above and beyond what the traditional is, and it's really burdening that project and putting it in a place where it might not be able to pay. And then we're always looking at ongoing research of different construction methods, different ways to have cost-saving practices. One thing that's come up really an exciting option is 3D printing. And I know Habitat for Humanity has done their first, I think it was in Tempe, they did their first pilot of the 3D printed home. So looking at ongoing innovations and ways that we can streamline that and make that happen. Okay, we're almost there. I know it's a lot. So we have 3 more initiatives. The number 6 is to increase affordable housing developer representation. So this is some feedback we heard from the community that on those decision-making boards that I mentioned, our village planning committees and our planning commission is where that rezoning process happens. And I know every community has kind of a different process, but within those committees and commissions, they wanted to see a little bit more representation of folks that do housing and do affordable housing so they can advocate for the need of housing as those decisions are being made. So looking at ways we can increase that representation and help with those decisions and have a voice to the need for housing as decisions are being made. And as NIMBYism comes up, it can be, more awareness of that in the development process. This is where we wanted to package a preservation toolkit. So we're looking at areas that are subject to gentrification, that are subject to displacement, and how can we preserve that existing affordable housing stock and the existing naturally occurring affordable housing, which is becoming a harder and harder thing to identify. But there were areas within the city of Phoenix where traditionally it is a place where we could find more naturally occurring housing. And what we're seeing more as the market goes up is that folks are coming in, they're taking our Class C and Class D apartments, doing a little rehab, and they're increasing their rent significantly. And the folks that could afford to live there no longer can live there. And it's causing an increase in people experiencing homelessness. It's causing a lot of issues. So we wanted to create a toolkit for the city to be able to take a look at areas and try to use preservation tactics where we can. And one is, some people call land banking. We ended up calling it strategic acquisition. So there's different funding sources that folks can use to go into communities and strategically acquire properties that might be subject to this type of displacement, or if it's vacant land and you want to preserve some affordable housing in an area, you can purchase a vacant land and for the redevelopment of affordable housing in an area that you think could be subject to gentrification or displacement ahead of that displacement occurring. So it's a way to kind of strategically plan and find ways to preserve a resource in an area. We've also seen a community land trust model used. Some folks use that for single family homes. Some folks use it for multifamily. You can really use that as a way to have a long-term affordability on a property, because as the property is resold, it's always resold, especially on the single family side, to another affordable buyer. So it's a way to preserve affordable home ownership in an area that might be subject to gentrification. Then we had of course, our landlord incentive. So what we did here is we're offering a $500 bonus for every resident that you accept a HAP contract with for this Section 8 program. So that is a pretty great incentive, especially in these times where landlords sometimes are looking for payments so that we have seen. I think the last numbers I looked at, we've attracted over 400 landlords. And of those, some were returning landlords, which is great because we want to keep landlords. Once they're in the program, we want to keep them in the program. So it was helping us retain the landlords we had. And then also I think we have almost 200 of those are new landlords that weren't a part of the program before. So it's been really successful. And we used some of our city ARP funds to pay for that program. I think initially we had $500,000 set aside for the landlord incentive program, and they just received another $1 million to continue the program so that we can keep providing that incentive. But it's been pretty successful at attracting new landlords. And then our rental rehab program, this is a way you can kind of combat that market force that I talked about, where folks are coming in and they're flipping our naturally occurring affordable housing. You can use CDBG funds or home funds or other federal funds to rehab the property and place an affordability period on it, so you can make sure that the rents remain at that lower level and don't get increased within a certain period of time. So it's a great way to not only revamp the affordable housing that we have so it's more healthy and safe for folks to live there, but also preserving that long-term affordability. And then let's see, support effective affordable housing legislation. So there, as you can tell from a lot of the things that we talked about, we need some larger level changes, not only on the state legislative side, but also on the federal side. So we talked about the housing choice vouchers and how we don't have enough and there's not enough resources. Having advocacy along those lines is going to be a game changer. And then also looking at ways that our state can make a difference. So one thing we really advocated for was the state housing tax credit, and that was approved. So now I'm working with the Arizona Department of Housing and hoping to roll that out with our next round of applications for the qualified allocation plan. So that's exciting news. And we used to, before the recession back in the day, we used to have an annual set aside allocation for our state housing trust fund. And since that time, it has not been reinstated. So we are pretty unique as a state to have the kind of gap in housing that we have, or the lack of supply in housing, and to not have a state housing trust fund. So that's something that we're always advocating for and wanting more of. And I'm doing my best now that I'm working for the Arizona Department of Housing to spend the money that we have so we can showcase that we need more of it. So that's kind of a few advocacy elements, and always looking at ways that we can support affordable housing through changes in legislation, because there's definitely some changes that could occur that could help. And then one thing I love to highlight is it's so important to tell the story. And I think that's why the Housing Phoenix plan was successful, is because we looked at a way to tell the story, to bring the data to the people and really explain that this is a problem for the majority of people in our community. The majority of people in our community cannot find affordable rental housing. But in that process, we also wanted to create an education campaign. So they're in the process of making a more formalized education campaign where they can debunk some of the myths that are associated with affordable housing and associated with some of the false thinking about the negative impact affordable housing can bring. And then also create positive reframing, not only around affordable housing, but also telling the story and talking about the benefits that those housing units can have for our community members, and looking at a positive way to talk about not only that, but density, because density is always part of the conversation, especially when we're talking about our multifamily affordable housing. So looking at reframing density and how we can talk about it as a benefit will be part of that ongoing education opportunity. And I think they're working on developing that education campaign and rolling it out. So that is it. I know it's a lot, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to dive in more detail. Oh gosh, you're speechless. That's never a good sign.
If I may, Chair, I just want to say that that is definitely an excellent strategies. I really saw the impact that all of those will have. And so thank you for being so thorough and really basically touching on the things that are really making a difference.
Thank you, Liz.
Hello, this is Mark. I have a couple of questions. One had to do with livable wages. One of the reasons that housing is unaffordable is because people are not paid very well. And so how do you work on that level too? So that people who are seeking housing have resources to pay for housing, in addition to resources, that is housing that is available in the community. So those two things seem to be connected. And if we're only looking at one and not looking at the other, then we continue to be in the situation that we are.
Yeah, that's a great point. It came up as well when we did our outreach for the Housing Phoenix plan. And the City of Phoenix Council was also at the same time simultaneously looking at a change to their minimum wage requirements, especially with city contracts. So there were some actions that they were looking to enact separately from the Housing Phoenix plan to kind of address the wage gap, because that's another issue too. It's a national issue, and then it's also an issue in the localities too. There are some changes that folks can make on the local level or can suggest on the local level. that the Phoenix, that I don't know where they ended up with it, but I know they were entertaining that all folks that participate in contracts with the city of Phoenix would have a mandated minimum wage. So they can at least dictate that the folks that they're contracting with are paying their people a livable wage. So
Yeah, it goes beyond, it goes beyond minimum wages. I mean, just the whole wage structure is an important part of this conversation. So it's, we need to have that all together as we're looking at things like housing.
yes.
And then I know other people have things to say, so I'll just, I will wait for them to ask their other questions.
No, that's a good question. That's a good point. Thank you.
Liz?
So I know that Phoenix and Maricopa County more broadly, I don't think that I'm overstepping by saying that has sentiment that is generally like pretty anti-homeless. And I'm curious about the marketing materials, especially when agencies like Phoenix Police do like, homeless sweeps and try to charge power companies for, living in canals, for people living in canals and things like that. It seems like it's thoroughly ingrained in, institutions and also in people's belief systems just personally. So what are those marketing materials going to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So so what the city of Phoenix decided, and this might be a tactic I know other folks are interested in too, is like the city of Phoenix decided to separate their homeless strategies solutions plan from the affordable housing plan, because they, like you're mentioning, for folks that are experiencing homelessness, it's a very layered issue, and it has a lot of separate types of barriers that are not always intertwined with just building the structure of affordable housing. So they decided to separate the plan for whatever reason. So I have such a heart for addressing issues related to homelessness, and I was really bummed when they separated it out because I wanted to be a part of that process. But yeah, I do think that the ways in which we are going to target this education plan is going to be related to like having a discussion around affordable housing need, kind of like how we talked about here, like that there's a gap for 160,000 units, and bringing down that message to who are the people in our community that can't afford to live here. So kind of making a story, telling the story, kind of like how I did today, about who needs housing, so that people don't have a negative perception about the folks that need affordable housing, is really what the heart of that debunking for affordable housing needs to be. But I'd love to see, as a part of the homeless strategies in areas, for them to also be doing a similar education campaign for folks experiencing homelessness. Because when you really dig into the data of the folks that are experiencing homelessness, there is such a negative perception of the folks, and it's not accurate to the data. So I mean, I know that's not my area of expertise, and I know it's not really what I've been able to be a part of, but I'm hoping one day my job will morph into something like that, because someone needs to tell the story because it's not being told accurately. And I think that's why we're seeing the policies rolled out the way that they are in certain jurisdictions, and it's really sad to see. So I definitely can agree with that sentiment.
If that ever happens, let me know,
Shay?
because I'd love to be part of it.
Okay, you got it.
Shay?
Yeah, I'm wondering on the zoning piece, especially now that you're working with the state housing department, is there talk of, the zoning piece is huge. In my mind, there's like two big buckets with affordable housing. The zoning is a huge one, and so is, finding permanent funding streams, and you touched on all of that. But with the zoning one, in California, they've started to address zoning at the state legislature level. Do you see any potential for that, where it's like not just being directed by little enclaves of communities that get to super hyper dictate and articulate who and how and what they want in their communities, but that it's coming from, a much broader, policy level like that?
That's a great question. So one thing that we have working against us right now is there are a few restrictions on the state side that don't allow cities to put forward certain zoning options, and one would be inclusionary zoning. So that's a tool that a lot of cities in our situations or jurisdictions or states in our situation have, so that say a new multifamily housing complex comes on, they automatically have to dedicate 20% as affordable or workforce or pay into a fund. So it's an automatic, easy way to either fund affordable housing or create new affordable housing. So a lot of the major cities have that tool. We can't, we're preempted on the state level. So I'm glad you brought that up. And there's also some preemptions around, Airbnb, where we're not able to really kind of impact that in the way California has. So the thing, when I was out and doing my research and talking to folks, I heard more traction and people interested in allowing us to have that tool in our tool belt than ever before. A lot of times when I had have conversations before, people would just say they would shut it down. They wouldn't even like talk about it, right? I could see Arizona moving down in that trajectory and being more open to it than ever before, especially because I've seen some traction with the state low-income housing tax credit and some other things that I saw push the needle. But I think we'd need a lot more advocacy to happen. But I am a dreamer, and I can keep dreaming. And I think that we're definitely further along than we ever have been in people being interested in that tool.
Any other questions for Cherie? Actually, I do have one. Cherie, do you have available kind of a deeper dive on how you've implemented some of these things? That would be available for us to look at.
Yeah. Let me stop my share, and I'm going to open up so as I mentioned, I am not with the city anymore, but I can point you to their website because they've created, as part of their education campaign, they have created, let me see, I haven't been there. It used to be on my when it's memorized, because you go there all the time. Let's see. I will share this, and I'll share it in the chat too, so y'all can see, but the Phoenix Housing Department has created a web page for the Housing Phoenix plan. So you can take a look at the plan if you want to dive into the actual plan itself. And then it also has within that, the different, we have quarterly reports that they submit that show the status of all the 9 different initiatives and little blurbs about the status. And then it also has a resource page so that you can kind of take a look at the different resources that have rolled out. So they've already identified the city-owned land that they want to tackle through the Housing Phoenix plan, and they've created a phasing approach. So let me re-share my screen because I finally got there. Let's see. Okay, so there you go. So the website is phoenix.gov/housing/plan. So that's where you can really take a look. You'll see they have this counter where they're every quarter they're updating the count of units that have been created. As you can see, the primary count is happening in that market space. So the market is really moving forward to kind of start addressing that need. But I don't anticipate seeing any changes in the affordable or workforce numbers outside of what's traditionally built every year until they start finalizing and implementing some of those 9 initiatives for the affordable housing. But if you click on the link here, it'll open up the plan so you can read the plan. The implementation status is where you'll see, I hope it works. Well, you'll see the quarterly reports here. So if you're interested, you can kind of take a look there. And then they have information about the city-owned land initiative and the phasing plan, as well as the parcels that they've identified for the first phase. So that's what they got there. Is once they finalize the education plan as well, it'll be landing here. So you'll see the materials there. They're hoping to create infographics and Powtoon, so short clips to explain what affordable housing means, what cost burden means, who can afford to live here. And then also have some, infographics that really explain, and maybe storytelling too. I'd love to have storytelling from residents that explain their stories and how they can afford housing in our community. There's also some posts about the press releases related to the plan and the different, stuff that went out on the news when they rolled out the plan. But that's pretty much it. I hope that helps.
Yep. Liz?
I just wanted to point out that there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
Oh.
From Newbert? Do you envision any incentives for people with COVID-19? Yeah. That's something that, when it was so interesting, because when we rolled out the plan, it was right in the middle of when COVID-19 hit. So it just compounded all the issues, and the folks that have a hard time with affordable housing have even harder time, right? And those are the folks that are most vulnerable from COVID-19 are even more affected. So the city of Phoenix really I think they did a good job targeting their ARP funds to address folks that are most vulnerable. And a lot of it was targeted to affordable housing, which was really nice. But I think that was the main resource that they had to try to target to help folks that are most vulnerable. But again, it's just the need is so great. It's just a drop in the bucket. And the supply of affordable housing is just so short that it makes it really difficult on so many levels. Did I close that? No. Okay. Phew. I thought I closed my Zoom thing. I had a moment of panic. Okay. Anything else? No?
Cherie, thank you very much. Speaking personally, I was impressed at what you guys have done, and congratulations on your new position at the Arizona Department of Housing. I think you're gonna do great things there. So really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll put my email in the chat. So if you all have questions, you can reach out as well. They are trying to fill my position, the affordable housing advocate at the city of Phoenix. So if you know anyone, definitely push them over there. And I think they're hoping to create another position, a deputy director that would oversee the plan too. So definitely looking for good people to take the plan through the finish line. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Okay. Thank you again. So our next agenda item is a housing update with Liz and Ann.
Yeah, so and just I want to say a big thank you also to Cherie on doing that for us, and we'll talk more about the Phoenix plan as part of this update, but we have a few things to cover, and Liz, feel free to jump in too, but we're going to talk about a new eviction prevention program that Jason is rolling out, so he's going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the update from the last mayor and council meeting that many of you saw Liz's preview at the last meeting. So we're going to talk about that and then talk about a few affordable housing consultant projects we have moving. So I'm going to let Jason go first as he's had a very long day.
Thanks, Ann. And when Ann asked me to share on this new eviction prevention effort, I didn't realize I was going to follow Cherie. So I'm not going to be as exciting, unfortunately. But we are really excited about this project. So I think, as most folks know, the city and the county and the state have all received considerable infusions of eviction prevention funds over the last year and a half. And those eviction prevention funds are largely financial assistance with very light touch supportive services, right? So, the agencies that are delivering those dollars are able to provide some level of support to help folks rebound from crisis financial situations. But we know that there are households that have much more severe service needs and for whom Financial assistance and maybe some light touch referrals in connection probably aren't going to result in longer term housing stability. And so in HUD's kind of matrix of interventions, there's sort of this distinction between homelessness prevention and eviction prevention. And like most simply put, it's the problem is largely financial, eviction prevention. The problem is financial and other severe service needs that are going to need more support, homelessness prevention. And so the city and the county are collaborating on the release of about $2.5 million in new homelessness prevention funds. So funds targeted for those harder to serve folks who have more significant service needs and are the most likely to become homeless if they're evicted, right? So often, and I think we've heard this as we hear, a tsunami of evictions, and we've heard people say a tsunami of homelessness. We know most people who are evicted actually don't end up being homeless. They do end up in challenging housing situations for sure, but most folks don't become homeless. And so we have developed a screening sort of triage tool that one looks at eligibility for homelessness prevention. It is federally funded, so there's specific eligibility, but then really looks at vulnerability to start to tease apart those folks who are more likely to become homeless if they're evicted and there isn't a service in place for them. And so that looks primarily at folks that have long-term histories of underemployment, families with children, people with prior criminal convictions, and a number of other things on the triage tool. I won't run through all of them with you, but really tries to identify those folks who are going to have the hardest time rehousing independently. And so we've developed this tool, and now we're launching a web portal that people can go to the website, complete a self-assessment on the site, and based on the results of that assessment, be told, yes, you're prioritized for homelessness prevention, and it will immediately direct to a homelessness prevention hub that I'll talk about in a moment. Or it doesn't look like you're eligible for homelessness prevention, and then we'll redirect those folks to the existing eviction prevention hub that's being managed by CIC. So as part of this collaboration, we're the Pima County Sullivan Jackson Employment Center, which operated the shelter hub during the height of the pandemic when we were doing motel sheltering. They're going to operate a homelessness prevention shelter hub. So in our current system, there are a slew of agencies throughout the community that complete coordinated entry assessments for homelessness prevention, although there's a very small amount of funding available to serve people through that. And so we're going to move all of the homelessness prevention assessment into a single site so that as the moratorium has ended and we start to see rising numbers of evictions, all of our community partner agencies that primarily work with people experiencing homelessness aren't flooded with assessments for a service they then can't deliver anyway. So all assessments will go through a single site and then through a network of contracts with community agencies. Those organizations will then deliver rental assistance. So up to 6 months of rental assistance as homelessness prevention is what we're looking at, as opposed to that kind of 1 to 2. I think the eviction prevention rules are maybe 3 months out and 12 months back. So this is a longer period of rental assistance. And because of some waivers that HUD's allowed, we're able to provide temporary hotel shelter for those households while they're searching for housing. So if they enter homelessness prevention before they're evicted, we can provide the funding and resources to avoid the eviction. If the eviction has occurred or is just at a past that point of no return, then we can provide hotel stay while they're looking for new housing, and then all of their move-in costs and up to 6 months of additional rental assistance. So this launch is really exciting, and it fills a really critical gap in our community and also offers us an opportunity to test a more effective way of delivering homelessness prevention than we have in the past. So we also know when we put these types of services out that folks who are familiar with services find that information quickly, and resources are very limited, right? And so we know that that communities of color, particularly refugee communities, monolingual, Spanish-speaking households, folks residing in rural communities or in tribal communities tend to get that information less, period. I guess is a good way to say that. And then we also know, because of some mapping that's been done in Pima County, some of the zip codes in which the most evictions are occurring. So we're launching a targeted affirmative outreach campaign that's using social marketing. So we're doing radio advertising, bus shelter advertising, social media, Google ads, and then print cards that we're taking to sort of the properties that are known to be the primary evictors. We've identified sort of the 5 properties in the Tucson area that have the highest numbers of evictions since the onset of the pandemic. And it is, unfortunately, in looking at that mapping, you can see it is very, evictions are being driven by very specific management companies in the community. And so getting resources into the hands of those tenants is important. And so Anne asked that I share quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I apologize, I'm a little under the weather if you hear kind of crickets in my voice. I'm going to share quickly just some mock-ups of the advertising that's going to begin going out next week. And will be, as I mentioned, targeting zip codes that are primarily BIPOC residents, zip codes with high rates of eviction, and zip codes in tribal and rural areas. And all of the digital advertising as well as radio advertising is going to be done in both English and Spanish, and radio advertising also with targeted radio spots with tribal radio as well. So I'm going to share this mock-up quickly. So this is, so the first here, these are mock-ups of the 2 versions of bus shelter ads that we'll be running. And then below, this is 1 version of about 9 versions of this ad that will be used in social advertising. So social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook advertising. And so in any of those digital advertising spaces, we tend to do the same ad, but with right here. So we have a Black African-American younger man alone. And so swapping out those images so that the targeting can be done in a way that people can see advertising that reflects them and encourages like a sense of comfort and confidence in the service. So that is—
Liz, do you have, oh, sorry, Liz, you have a question?
Yeah, so first of all, this is amazing. And I wanted to ask, you mentioned hotel vouchers, and I heard that Sullivan Jackson is no longer offering the COVID-19 like quarantine vouchers. And I'm wondering if I know that it's not directly related to what you're talking about, but I'm wondering if there is any sort of like quarantine motel voucher program that's happening with Delta, and if there's any additional funding that's being.
Sure. So, so currently, and I think this group knows that the city has purchased some properties recently to expand shelter and bridge housing. And so currently we're maintaining bed holds at one of the shelters one of the properties that we purchased a property and are operating shelter in partnership with CVI in the event that someone is diagnosed COVID positive and trying to enter shelter. And what we're doing with the Delta variant, honestly, Liz, is sort of watching to see the demand on those bed holds and to figure out, we've put some things in the wings to make sure we can stand up motel support if we need to, right? But what we're seeing is high transmission across the community, but much like the entirety of the pandemic, we're not seeing high rates of transmission among unsheltered people experiencing homelessness. And so right now there just hasn't been much demand. And in standing up capacity, like preparatory capacity, particularly in motels for that population, requires us to do block room purchase, have security funded, health services funded. So it becomes this very costly operation that right now we just haven't yet experienced the demand for. But to that point of like, this is a rapidly evolving situation, we've absolutely put some strategies in place so that we can stand those resources up if we need to in a more flexible way than we did originally. And I think we want to learn some lessons from that original hotel operation where folks were moving into hotels, and we had to. We did exactly what we needed to do in that moment. I'm incredibly proud of the city and the county. But also we paid for a lot of capacity that we maybe didn't need. And there were people, like, by putting folks into a hotel with no known where do you go next, we had people residing in hotels for 9 months or longer, which really isn't like a healthy or great outcome. And it's we did a cost analysis at one point and learned that for every month we had someone in a hotel, we could have had them in an apartment for 3.5. And so, so we're trying to be a bit more creative and adaptive, I think, as we go forward.
Mindy?
Thank you, Jim. Has any data been collected on the individuals that you provided services for, on whether or not they were enrolled in the indigent behavioral healthcare system?
I do not know of a data collection that would go specific to and so just to make sure that I'm catching the language you're using, so really thinking about kind of regional behavioral health authority, access funded behavioral health services, Mindy?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
I'm not sure of that data is going to be the answer here, and I don't know. I'll look to Ann, Liz, others at the city who may know that at their fingertips. It absolutely is data that would have been collected because it's required data as part of the homeless management information system, whether folks are receiving healthcare services. So we would at least know whether they engaged in access, not necessarily whether they were participating in behavioral health specifically.
I have a curiosity more about the participation in the REBA as a REBA participant. I have much to say
Mindy,
about.
I can talk to you about that separately, where I've been working in a access funded organization for a while now, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that separately.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Liz. Look forward to
Jason, you still with us?
I am, yes. Oh, I wonder why I've got the camera. That's interesting. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what that was, but sorry about that, Jim.
Okay, go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't. Was there another question?
No. Oh, well, I guess Wendy does. Wendy Asher.
Yeah, hi. Jason, I was just wondering, I Googled the website because I'm on my phone on this call and I'm still doing some other stuff on my laptop.
And it is
when is this going to go live?
Yeah,
what do you say?
I said, and it is
Next
not
week.
live yet. Yeah, this is all, you are getting a sneak peek of campaign materials that are launching next week.
And do you have any concerns? I work at Southern Arizona Legal Aid. Do you have any concerns about our giving that information out next week? Should we like be gentle or?
Oh, I'm sorry. With you folks sharing information, I would say please wait until you see it organically, or we send. I suspect Ann or Liz would be willing to share a notice to the commission at the point that this is live. Yes, in the meantime,
that would be awesome.
I would ask, please wait. We don't want to send folks to dead ends, of course.
That's why I asked.
The county is standing up their operation right now, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jason. I just felt like between the affordable housing discussion, we'd let you know something that's being implemented sooner than later. In terms of, I know that you still have another item on the agenda, but I did want to follow up from last month's meeting, talking about Liz's presentation to mayor and council. So she did a great job, I'll say, and Liz, feel free if you want to jump in here at all. But so I created a document to summarize what happened in terms of that mayor and council meeting and where we're going from here with that. So.
And while you do that, I'll just say thank you, because a lot of what your feedback last week or last month was very helpful. The most important thing is that we have a mayor and council that is very anxious and are excited and supportive of this work, and have given us a charge to work with all of you to roll out a plan. And it will be not a plan that is done, and we just try to check box it as we learn. We'll continue to improve on it and expand on it. But I think what we heard from Cherie today and what we know is the desire of mayor and council, I think we'll be able to put something out that we can all come together, unified, and have this common vision. So, and that's about all I have to say about that.
Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, it's being weird on my end, but you see City of Tucson Affordable Housing Strategy?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So at that meeting, Councilmember Ulick made a motion that based on the information that Liz provided and where we're at in terms of need in the community, that Housing and Community Development return with a strategic plan regarding affordable housing in the next 90 days. So that was really part of where I was really excited that Cherie could come and share the Phoenix plan and really how that was created and what led to that. And so I wanted to walk through 90 days is obviously not a ton of time. And so really wanted to talk to the commission and really ask that the commission be a real active part in helping create this plan. And so I wanted to walk through quickly. I know you have one more agenda item where we're at, and just if you have preliminary feedback now, great, but I do plan on the next few months bringing this back, and also really hope to work with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee on this and really trying to, like Phoenix did, one of my big goals is to have a limited number of action items as mayor and council directed, really that can help tie the resources we have coming with ARPA to actions. And so wanted to walk through this today. So the timeline process for completion, here I really do hope to work with the commission as much as possible on this. And the good news is, with all the work we've talked about before with the housing market study and a lot of what we've been doing, we have a lot of the pieces. And so to me, it's tying it together in a strategy and getting some feedback on it, but it's really the implementation that's most important. And so with that, in terms of creating the strategy, what we're thinking is I'll go through a draft outline today, and I'll be working over the next month on filling in that timeline, that outline a fair bit. And then each month, hopefully you'll see it coming together a bit more. In October, really hoping to do some public outreach regarding it with this commission, also doing at least one virtual public meeting and really working with key stakeholders. Since I've been at housing, we've had some focus groups with developers talking about what the city can do in terms of incentivizing affordable housing development, and really hope to do that again to help narrow down the goals for this plan. Based on that, hoping to post a draft version of this probably early November. And then in November, ideally, get more public input and go back to mayor and council and really get more feedback from them. And then ideally return by the end of the year as they've directed us in terms of that timeline. So based on that, here's the very tentative outline and really open to thoughts and suggestions. But as I said, over the past 15 months, since I've been working in housing, I've seen so much already put together. And so really want to tie this together and really zone in on those strategies. So there'll be a very short, and I do like the Phoenix plan, which I think is a great length. It's not too much. It really focuses on the key information. I really hope to have a pretty short plan that is very visual and really focuses on key things. So a short section on background, a short section that summarizes the data that we've already been looking at. And if we feel like we can get some new data that's important, we'll look to do that. But in the past year, we've done a comprehensive housing market study. We have information on the poverty and urban stress online map, And then in the people, communities, and homes investment plan document, that challenges section goes into a ton of the data. So take a few key pieces really similar to the Phoenix plan from that and really just include the highlights to that. Section 3, so as part of that PCHIP plan, we really did provide a framework of really what housing and community development and what the community can really be thinking of. And this will continue to evolve. I'm by no means saying it's perfect, but we already have a framework in terms of some of the things we've already been hearing that's really important. So in the home section, there are 4 main priority areas. 1, to increase affordable rental housing, which includes preserving what we have. The second priority area is expanding affordable home ownership opportunities, including trying to keep people in their homes. And then there is a priority section for the PCHIP home section on really making sure that it's stable, healthy, and safe housing. So for instance, one of those goal areas was really trying to help people age in place. And then the last PCHIP area is more around housing segregation and thinking about equity when it comes to housing. And so full disclosure, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to tie that in, because that's really what as somebody at Housing Community Development, we're thinking of day in and day out. And so the challenge will be taking that framework and really identifying, similar to Phoenix, somewhere in the ballpark of 10 goals for mayor and council. As part of the motion, mayor and council explicitly asked that we provide a summary of the funding resources when it comes to affordable housing, including opportunities for the rescue plan dollars. And then like Phoenix and like Cherie went through the 9 that Phoenix identified, really identifying goals that action items that mayor and council can take, adopt, and really create that strategy for us moving forward. As part of the plan, you saw the tracking that Phoenix did. We may have a section at the end just outlining what implementation and tracking is going to look like. But for now, that's what we're thinking, and really just wanted to really want the commission to provide input as we go through this. You each have unique perspectives and experience, and so want to ask kindly that you really do help guide us as we move through this. So I see it. Can I ask that?
And what? Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Okay, just wanted to add to that. Thank you, Lan, for that overview. I would really encourage that for our subcommittee meetings, that we use that time to kind of provide some initial responses or recommendations based on our subject matter. That would be my request. That would help us.
Great.
Okay. Shay?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I know there's a crunch with time, with the mayor and council, but I think what was really effective about the Phoenix plan is that they spent the time with the outreach and sort of public education. Is there any way you all could ask mayor and council for more time for that, or to fund that, or, something of that nature?
If you don't mind, I'll answer. I don't think mayor and council expect that this plan will be the idea of adoption. I think it's a working plan. I think they'll want to hear more public input, but I think they really want to see our approach. The goals and strategies, I think we can certainly still continue to do the outreach and education to make sure that the public is aware and able to provide feedback. And as we tweak it, we can always go back to mayor and council and say, we've learned some new things, we've heard from the public, and we recommend some adjustments. So I wouldn't feel that that what happens in 90 days is the final end document. Can I just
any other questions?
I want to be at Shay's house. It sounds really fun over there.
Well, Liz, you answered the question that I had, which was how can we help, or what's the best way to get involved? So it sounds like the best way is through our subcommittee meetings. And I believe there is a representative from the housing department in each of the subcommittees that can help take that feedback and consolidate it into the strategic plan.
And
Any other questions?
And the other thing is we will certainly, for each meeting that we have in October, November, there'll be a part for feedback as we make progress.
And
Sounds
then
good. Well, good job, guys. Good job, Liz, on your presentation. And I think 3 months is a pretty aggressive time frame for developing a strategic plan. But I think it's probably one of those things that once it's in place, it will become a living document and will evolve over time. So, any other questions for the housing department? Okay, hearing none, we've got about 10 minutes left, Shay, for agenda item number 7 on the additional dwelling unit ordinance. So you have the floor.
I'm sorry, guys. I apologize for the background noise. Yes, I drafted. There's a letter that's been drafted. It's really pulled language from other advocates nationally who are working on this similar issue, and that was sent out to everyone. So I think really we just need a motion to approve, right, and to send out. I wasn't sure who, since we don't have a letterhead or who exactly would be signing the letter, so I left that part blank. But yes, I think. Do I need to make a motion, Anne, to approve the letter to Mayor and Council?
I think it would be good to have a motion, and I would say the chair and/or vice chair would send it out.
I put in a couple of edits into the letter, but they're not like huge edits.
Sure, yeah, if there's edits, please, anyone or comments.
Like I added them as comments.
Liz, did you send those?
If you open it as like a Google document, they should appear as comments. But mostly I just had questions about like clarifying a couple of like jargon terms, like do we need to do that with the letter to Mayor and Council, and a couple of like other small grammar things. That's it.
The version that I got was a PDF.
Right. That's.
I didn't get a PDF.
So I sent out a PDF to everybody. That's the only version that I've sent out.
I got something that I was able to like type in.
Okay. And so in terms of logistics, I would say, Liz, if it's more questions or nothing substantial, then Shay can look at it. But if you have questions about the actual content, that's something that should be clarified here before it goes out.
I don't have it up. So we can just put a pin in it, and I will just contact Shay separately. I think it was like I had 2 things that were in it that I was like, this is a term we haven't talked about even in the commission. So like I don't, if it can be clarified, then.
Do you remember what they were so we could discuss it here?
One term was like missing middle housing. And it was discussing, you know, like historic housing and that sort of thing. And then another thing that I asked about was like the re-emergence of ADUs. And so my question was kind of like, how is this a re-emergence?
Well, casitas are a historic housing typology. I mean, if you research Barrio Viejo and what was allowed, or Barrio Libre as they call it, like there was no zoning. It was kind of a free-for-all. Like you could have the tiendita next to the house, next to the, right? These are historic typologies that have been allowed, you know, historically, not just in our barrios, but also like throughout the country historically. It wasn't so difficult to build casita cottages, you know, 6 plexes or 5 plexes or 4 plexes. And that kind of range between what's the gap, the continuum between in housing between like the typologies in between like a single family detached house and then an apartment complex, there's a whole missing middle segment, right? That's illegal now to build. And that's kind of some of the background context. And, you know, in the last presentation we saw with Cherie, you know, she even touched on that too with the zoning. You know, part of what's holding us up nationally, not just in Tucson, but from moving forward is density. And people have major hangups around density, especially in a town like Tucson where, you know, outside of the like our urban Sonoran, urban barrio urbanism, outside of that typology where there's like 0 lot lines and like super high density, the other like prolific typology in Tucson is the ranch house, suburban ranch house kind of style. And that I feel that suburban ranch house style like kind of squashed out what was our true core of urbanism. And so that's kind of some of the historic context and things I was thinking about when I was writing the letter.
So just in terms of this letter needs to go out this month, correct?
Yeah, ideally the Planning Commission is meeting September 15th, so we don't have that much time. So
okay.
I mean,
So
I
I'm
guess,
just trying to think about, go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to say, you know, Liz, I definitely appreciate the clarifications there, but, you know, as it is, I think it's great as it is. I think you really hit a lot of the high points of why this is important. And if it were left up to me, I would just go ahead with the letter as it is. You know, I think we can do that as a group today. And I think you're right, it needs to get to the Planning Commission. So I'm not going to make a motion yet, but I would like for this to kind of go out as is so we can get it off our plate and to the people it needs to go to.
Mindy?
Thank you. Liz, you're an astonishing writer. I mean, Shay, sorry. And Liz, it's an amazing letter. I wholeheartedly support it going out as is. So I'll make a motion that we accept the letter as is and have it sent out for the September 15th meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can I second?
Shay? Too late, it's already been seconded.
Can I withdraw my second for Shay?
You want to withdraw your second, Jay?
I'm half kidding, but I would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and put this to vote. I agree. I think it's better to put something out that's really good than as opposed to something that's perfect in the interest of time. Liz?
I'm just pointing out there's a question about whether this letter is shared with the public. I believe it will be shared with the public when it goes to to the Planning Commission. But I didn't know if Anne or Shay, if you wanted to add anything to the response.
I'll just say, Joe, the draft was available today, so we'll post it as soon as we can.
Okay, any other comments before we put it to vote? Okay, Michael Edmonds.
Aye.
Shay?
Aye.
Liz Wilson?
Aye.
Jay Young?
Aye.
Mindy Bernstein?
Aye.
Lori Mazurbo?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. If you guys are okay with it, I will sign it on behalf of the commission, and we'll get it out here this next week. Shay, anything else on the ADU item?
Not for right now, thanks.
Okay. Next steps, our next meeting is going to be on October 7th. It's our goal to have all the subcommittees meet before that. When Mike and I met with Anna and Liz last, we were brainstorming ideas for future meetings. And one idea that was discussed, I'd like to get feedback from this group on, is doing a site visit to 1 or 2 affordable housing projects. We're building one right now on stone and prints for Newport Partners. It's called Newport at Amphi. It's at a pretty good stage actually to do a tour. I know that Jason Heisey and La Frontera have a project that is getting close to finishing as well over on Grant. And I think it's on 6th Avenue. And I can reach out to Jason and see if we can schedule schedule a site visit on both. But I'd just like to get some feedback from this group on if that's something that you guys would appreciate, or would prefer to stay virtual for the time being.
I've been working on that project for the past year, actually 2 years now, Newport at Amphi. So I know that I'm on site every other week, so I'm happy to show everyone around.
So I just would like some clarification, which is that it would be a official meeting and there would be a capacity for like members of the public to have access to that meeting for open meeting rules? Or would this just be an informal gathering of commission members?
That's a good question. Anne, what do you think?
Yeah, so I will say a lot of other commissions do site visits, but Liz, to your point, there will have to be a posting since there will be a quorum. I imagine there will be a quorum. So, but this is not uncommon for commissions to do field trips to see what they're working on.
Yeah, my thought was it would be in place of our next meeting, so we would do it on site, and so I'm not sure what would happen if we didn't have a quorum.
And Jim, just to clarify, you're thinking November, right? Not October.
Oh, we're saying November. November's fine too. We could do that.
Sorry, that's a question. I'm okay either way. I just want to clarify for the commissioners.
Yeah, I think actually probably November's a little bit better. It gives us one more month to kind of plan it out. So the next month we'll continue to do a virtual meeting, and then the question is for the month of November if we want to do an in-person tour of a couple affordable housing sites. So I see one thumbs up. Any other thoughts or feedback? Mindy?
November, the second Thursday in November is Veterans Day. I don't know if that is an issue for people.
Is that a city holiday?
I don't know. I don't work for the city. Is it, Anne?
I think it is.
It's a federal holiday, so.
Yeah, Veterans Day is a holiday. But I have, sorry, I think Veterans Day is November 11th, I believe.
Yes.
So the
yeah, we would meet on the
Thursday
4th.
Would be the 4th.
My bad. First Thursday, okay. Excuse me, sorry.
Okay, does anybody, I'm just gonna ask a question a different way. Does anyone have a concern with doing it? Is there anybody that is opposed to it?
I mean, I probably just wouldn't attend because of COVID. I'm not doing in-person things. I finally got a work from home job for the first time during the entire pandemic. So I'm not gonna do that, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Anybody
I think for
else?
me, it'll depend on how things are in November.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll read everybody's temperature again next month and kind of see how things progress, because it is a rapidly changing situation. Any other comments before we adjourn? Hi, Mindy, go ahead.
Thank you. My concern would be, this is such precious time that we have together to discuss agenda items, taking a meeting away from our agendas and what needs to get covered. I would be willing, and depending on where we're at with the pandemic, for those of us that are interested in touring the facilities, to do it on a different day than when the commission meets. That's
Okay.
my thought. But we.
Okay. That's good feedback. Okay, any other comments and ideas for future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. It is 6:03. So we started 3 minutes late, ended 3 minutes late. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks all.